It was a bright and quiet morning when the wealthy family eagerly awaited the arrival of their first child. The hospital room was filled with excitement, nervous energy, and the soft hum of machines. Every staff member seemed aware that this birth was special, not just because of the family's wealth, but because they had been dreaming about this baby for years. The mother, her hands trembling slightly, held onto her husband's hand as she waited. Both of them were imagining the moment they would finally meet their little one. The doctors and nurses were ready, having prepared meticulously for what they expected to be a normal delivery. Yet, none of them could have guessed what was about to happen. As the labor progressed, the mother's anticipation mixed with pain. Every contraction brought her closer to meeting her child. Her husband whispered words of encouragement, trying to calm both himself and her. Finally, after hours of waiting and careful guidance from the medical team, the moment arrived. The baby was born with a loud cry that echoed across the room. At first, everyone celebrated, as is customary with newborns. But then something unusual happened. The baby's cry was not like the usual cries of newborns. It was louder, sharper, and almost seemed to have an edge of distress in it. Every time the nurses tried to gently touch him, he screamed even louder, his tiny fists clenched, and his body stiffened. The mother instinctively reached out to hold him, hoping her touch would comfort him. But as soon as she did, his cries intensified, leaving both parents stunned and concerned. The nurses exchanged worried glances, murmuring softly among themselves about what could be causing such an extreme reaction. The doctor on duty, a highly experienced pediatrician, observed carefully, frowning slightly. He had seen hundreds of newborns in his career, but nothing like this. The baby's reaction was beyond normal, as if even the gentlest touch was unbearable to him. The mother tried different positions, softly humming lullabies, rocking the baby in her arms, but no matter what she tried, his weeping continued relentlessly. Every sound in the room seemed to startle him. Even the softest whisper, it was as if the world itself was too much for him to handle. Hours passed, and the baby showed no signs of calming down. The family grew worried. Their joy was slowly turning into fear. The parents began to question if something was seriously wrong with their child. The mother, exhausted and tearful, whispered to her husband, "Why won't he stop crying? Is he in pain?" He held her close, trying to hide his own worry, but deep down, he was just as anxious. Every instinct told him something was different about their newborn, something that required immediate attention. The hospital staff, noticing the unusual intensity of the baby's reactions, decided to monitor him closely. They checked his vitals repeatedly, making sure that his heart rate, breathing, and oxygen levels were all normal. To their relief, the baby was healthy physically. There were no signs of immediate illness, but the unexplained crying continued, and with every passing minute, it became clear that this was not just a normal newborn behavior. The doctor decided to call in a specialist, someone who had experience with rare and unusual infant conditions. Meanwhile, the parents watched helplessly as their dream child seemed so fragile and vulnerable. The baby, despite being born into a world of comfort and wealth, seemed overwhelmed by the simplest things, even the loving touch of his mother. The mother held her hand to her heart, feeling a strange mix of love, sorrow, and confusion. She had imagined this moment countless times in her life, dreaming of holding her baby, feeling his warmth, and soothing him with her touch. But reality was far from her dreams. Even the hospital room, with its soft lighting and comforting environment, did little to calm him. The baby seemed almost hyper-aware of every sound, every movement, every hand that approached him. It was as if his tiny body was responding to stimuli far more intensely than normal. The doctor, observing carefully, realized that this was a rare case that required careful study. He instructed the nurses to document every reaction, every gesture, every sound the baby made. Each detail could be crucial in understanding what made him so sensitive. By the end of that first day, it was clear that this birth was unlike any the hospital staff had ever seen. The baby's unusual reaction to touch had created a mix of fear, fascination, and urgency. The family's joy was intertwined with worry, and the medical team knew that the next steps they took would be critical. This baby, though born into wealth and comfort, was extraordinary in ways no one had anticipated, and everyone present in the room felt that they were witnessing the beginning of an Extraordinary story. As the first few days passed, the parents began to realize that their baby was unlike any child they had ever imagined. At first, they thought the nonstop crying would settle down, as most newborns eventually grow accustomed to the new world around them. But for this millionaire baby, nothing seemed normal. Every touch, no matter how gentle, triggered an intense reaction. His tiny body would stiffen, fists would clench, and a piercing cry would fill the room. The parents, exhausted from sleepless nights, began to feel a mixture of fear and helplessness. Every attempt to soothe him seemed to make things worse. The mother tried swaddling him tightly, hoping the warm embrace would comfort him. But even that caused him to cry louder. The father, sitting nearby, felt a knot in his chest as he watched his newborn struggle. He had imagined holding his son, rocking him gently, and hearing soft coos of contentment. But instead, he heard constant cries that pierced his heart. Even the family's staff, trained to handle delicate newborns, were at a loss, exchanging worried glances and whispering about the unusual intensity of the baby's reactions. The doctors, initially confident, began to worry. They ran routine tests to ensure that the baby's health was normal, and physically, he seemed perfectly fine. Heart strong, lungs working, no signs of infection or discomfort. Yet, the crying persisted without any clear reason. It was as if his body was rejecting the simplest forms of comfort, leaving everyone puzzled and anxious. As days turned into a week, the parents noticed patterns in his behavior. Certain touches, like a gentle pat on the back or holding his tiny hands, were unbearable for him. Even the softest hum or lullaby could startle him, making his crying louder. The baby seemed hyper-aware, almost as if he could feel every sensation more intensely than any normal child. Each reaction weighed heavily on the family, and they began to fear that they might never be able to bond with their child in the way they had dreamed. The mother, sitting beside his crib late at night, often whispered softly, "What is wrong with you, my sweet baby?" She would stroke his tiny head with utmost care, hoping to offer comfort. But even the gentlest touch brought renewed cries. The father, too, tried everything, singing, soft rocking, even sitting silently near him. But the baby's cries seemed unrelenting. The situation began to take a toll not just emotionally, but physically, as the parents spent nights awake, worrying, comforting, and hoping for some relief. The hospital staff grew concerned as well. The head nurse suggested consulting specialists who had experience with rare infant conditions. She explained that sometimes babies are born with extreme sensitivities or medical conditions that make normal touch overwhelming. While such cases were rare, she insisted that it was better to be thorough than to ignore the signs. The family agreed, realizing that this baby required extraordinary attention, something beyond the routine care of even the most skilled pediatricians. When the specialists arrived, they observed the baby carefully, noting every small movement, every twitch of the lips, and every loud cry. They tried different methods, varying the room temperature, dimming the lights, changing the bedding. But nothing seemed to make a difference. The baby's reaction to touch remained intense, almost as if he were in a constant state of alert. His eyes, wide and bright, seemed to take in every detail. Yet even the slightest human interaction was met with distress. By the end of that first week, it became clear to everyone, the parents, nurses, and doctors alike, that this baby was extraordinary, not in the way most people imagined, with talent or wealth, but in the way he experienced the world. Every sound, every touch, every tiny motion could overwhelm him, making life intensely difficult, yet strangely fascinating. The family's initial excitement was now mixed with worry, curiosity, and a determination to understand their child. Even in their concern, the parents never lost hope. They were determined to find answers, to give their baby the love and care he needed without causing him distress. And deep down, both mother and father knew that this journey, though challenging, would reveal a story unlike any other. A story of resilience, love, and an extraordinary child who was just beginning to show the world that he was truly unique. By the time the baby reached his second week, the concern in the hospital had grown heavier. The parents were exhausted, their eyes carrying sleepless nights and worry. They had tried everything they could imagine to comfort their child, yet every attempt ended with loud, piercing cries. Even the experienced nurses, who had handled countless newborns, admitted they had never seen anything like this. The baby's reactions were beyond anything normal. His tiny body would stiffen instantly, and his piercing cries seemed to echo long after the touch was gone. Realizing that ordinary care was not enough, the family called in a specialist, a doctor renowned for handling rare and unusual pediatric cases. This doctor had decades of experience and had been involved in several groundbreaking discoveries in infant care. When he arrived, there was a quiet tension in the room. Everyone waited anxiously, wondering if he would be able to understand the baby's extreme reactions. The doctor, calm but focused, observed the infant carefully from a distance. Not a word was spoken as he studied the tiny body, the delicate movements, the wide eyes that seemed almost too aware of everything around him. Finally, the doctor approached, his steps slow and deliberate. He examined the baby without touching him at first, carefully watching for any signs of distress or discomfort. The baby, however, immediately recognized the presence of someone new, and his cries intensified. His small fists clenched, tiny legs kicked, and his eyes opened wide, scanning every movement. The parents held their breath, both amazed and terrified at how responsive he was. The doctor, though trained for the unexpected, felt a wave of astonishment himself. He had seen sensitivity in infants before, but never anything as extreme as this. The doctor asked the parents to describe every behavior, every reaction, and every pattern they had noticed over the past days. They spoke about how the baby cried nonstop when touched, how even soft lullabies or gentle rocking could make him scream, how the simplest interactions seemed unbearable. The doctor listened intently, nodding, taking mental notes. Every detail was crucial, he explained, because rare conditions often hide in the smallest, most overlooked behaviors. Then, with a calm but serious expression, the doctor carefully attempted to examine the baby's reactions in a controlled way. He adjusted his approach, using minimal touch, speaking softly, and moving with precision. The baby reacted immediately, his cries rising sharply, his tiny body shaking. For a moment, even the doctor paused, as the intensity of the reaction was more extreme than he had anticipated. He stepped back, taking a deep breath, and studied the infant closely, realizing that this was no ordinary case. The sensitivity was profound, and it would require not just medical expertise, but patience, understanding, and innovation. As he continued observing, the doctor's face reflected both shock and fascination. He had never encountered such heightened responses in a newborn. It was as if the baby experienced every sensation with extraordinary intensity. Even the slightest touch or sound could overwhelm him. The parents watched silently, their hearts pounding, unsure of what the doctor would say next. Finally, the doctor spoke, his voice measured but filled with awe. This child is extraordinary, not in danger, but in sensitivity. His reactions are extreme, but they tell us something important. He perceives the world differently, and we must approach his care in a completely new way. The parents were relieved to hear that he was healthy, yet they understood the challenge ahead. The doctor explained that this would require specialized care, careful monitoring, and a deep understanding of how their baby experienced the world. Every interaction, every touch, and every sound would need to be managed carefully. That day marked a turning point. The arrival of this expert doctor brought a glimmer of hope. He reassured the family that, though unusual, their baby could thrive, and that with the right techniques, the cries could be minimized, and bonding could begin safely. The parents felt a mixture of relief and curiosity, eager to learn from this specialist who seemed to understand what no one else could. For the first time since the birth, there was a sense that their extraordinary child might not just survive, but that he could grow up strong, loved, and understood. The family realized that this journey was just beginning, and that with guidance, patience, and care, their millionaire baby's unique story would unfold in ways no one could have imagined. After days of careful observation, the expert doctor decided it was time to dig deeper. He needed to understand why this baby reacted so intensely to even the gentlest touch. The parents watched anxiously as the doctor prepared for a thorough examination. This was not a routine checkup. This was an investigation into the unknown. Every detail mattered. From the baby's tiny facial expressions to the smallest twitch of a hand or foot, the hospital room was silent, filled with tension and anticipation. The doctor began by gently examining the baby's nervous system, running tests that were designed to reveal sensitivities and abnormalities that often went unnoticed. Every time he made the slightest movement toward the baby, the infant reacted with a sharp cry, his fists tightened, his legs kicked instinctively, and his little body seemed to tremble. The mother felt a pang of guilt each time she tried to help, wondering if she had unknowingly caused her baby discomfort. Yet, the doctor assured her that this was not her fault. This reaction was beyond normal, and it was not caused by parenting or environment. It was something innate, something the baby was born with. Hours passed as the doctor conducted a series of meticulous tests, observing reactions to light touches, soft sounds, and gentle movements. He even adjusted the room temperature and lighting, trying to find a factor that might calm the baby. But no matter what he tried, the baby remained extremely sensitive. Every sensation, even the faintest, seemed amplified. Leaving him distressed, the doctor's assistant took careful notes, realizing that this case was unlike any they had encountered. Each reaction told a story, a puzzle piece that would eventually reveal the full picture. Finally, after reviewing the observations and correlating them with medical data, the doctor leaned back, his face a mixture of astonishment and seriousness. This baby has an extremely rare condition called congenital hypersensitivity syndrome, he explained. It affects the nervous system in a way that amplifies every sensation, touch, sound, even temperature changes. The parents listened in disbelief, trying to absorb the meaning of these words. Their baby wasn't sick in the traditional sense. He wasn't in danger from illness, but his experience of the world was overwhelmingly intense. The doctor continued, explaining that such cases were incredibly rare, documented only a handful of times worldwide. Most doctors would never encounter a child like this in an entire career. What this means, he said, is that we must approach his care with extreme care and patience. We need to create a safe, controlled environment and teach the family how to interact without overwhelming him. The parents felt a mixture of relief and worry. Finally, there was an explanation, but it came with a new set of challenges. The baby's parents, though initially shocked, began to feel a sense of purpose. They realized that their child was unique in a way no one could ignore. They needed to understand him, to learn his signals, and to adapt to his extraordinary sensitivities. The doctor reassured them that, with the right approach, bonding was possible, and the baby could lead a happy, healthy life, even if it required special methods and more time than usual. That evening, the family sat quietly around the crib, watching their tiny child. They no longer saw just a baby crying nonstop. They saw a child experiencing the world more intensely than anyone else. Every movement and reaction now had meaning. Every cry was a signal that they needed to decode. The parents felt a mixture of awe and determination, knowing that their journey would be different, more challenging, but also profoundly rewarding. The doctor left the room with instructions for a specialized care plan, promising to guide the family every step of the way. The parents, exhausted but determined, held their baby close, mindful of his sensitivities, and silently promised to give him a world that would respect the way he felt. That day marked the true beginning of their extraordinary story, a story not just of wealth or status, but of understanding, patience, and the discovery of a child who saw the world in a way no one else did. After learning about their baby's rare condition, the parents faced an emotional storm unlike anything they had imagined. The relief of finally having an explanation was mixed with fear and uncertainty. They loved their child more than anything in the world, yet every attempt to comfort him seemed to bring pain instead of peace. The tiny apartment and hospital room, once filled with excitement and joy, now felt tense and fragile. Each cry was a reminder of the baby's extraordinary sensitivity, and it weighed heavily on their hearts. The mother, in particular, struggled with guilt. She had dreamed of holding her baby close, feeling his warmth, and softly humming lullabies to soothe him. Yet every touch she offered seemed to hurt him. The tiny whimpers and cries echoed in her mind long after the moments had passed. She wondered if she was failing as a mother, if her love was somehow not enough to comfort her child. Nights were the hardest. When the baby's cries pierced the still darkness, she would lie awake, hand trembling, trying to imagine how she could make him feel safe. The father, too, felt helpless. He wanted to shield his child from distress, to offer reassurance and protection, but he realized that love alone could not solve this challenge. Even simple tasks became moments of anxiety. Feeding times, diaper changes, or attempts to rock the baby required planning, patience, and careful observation. One wrong movement could trigger an outburst, leaving both parents exhausted and emotionally drained. They began to notice how their own stress affected the baby, and the pressure to remain calm became a constant, unseen weight. Friends and family offered advice and support, but often it only increased the tension. The baby's reactions were so unique that ordinary guidance did not apply. Each moment required careful adaptation, trial, and error. Yet, amidst the struggle, the parents discovered small victories. When the baby allowed a brief touch without crying, or when he gazed at them without distress, it felt like a triumph. They learned to communicate in subtle ways, using soft words, gentle eye contact, and minimal movements. Slowly, they began to understand the signals that indicated comfort or discomfort. These small breakthroughs were emotional lifelines, reminding them that patience and love were not wasted, even if progress was gradual. The emotional journey extended beyond exhaustion and guilt. It became a profound lesson in empathy, compassion, and resilience. The parents realized that their baby's extraordinary sensitivity was not a weakness, but a unique lens through which he experienced the world. They marveled at how every little detail, the hum of a machine, the brush of a finger, even the softness of a blanket, could evoke strong reactions. And they understood that their role was not to change him, but to guide him gently through life. At times, despair threatened to overwhelm them. When the cries lasted for hours, or when the baby reacted so violently to a simple touch, the parents would sit together, holding hands, quietly acknowledging the weight of their reality. But even in those moments, a spark of hope remained. They reminded themselves that understanding their child was a journey, not a momentary goal, and that every small success was a step toward connection. The hospital staff and the expert doctor played a critical role during this period, offering guidance, reassurance, and practical methods to reduce the baby's distress. They taught the parents techniques such as controlled touch, gradual exposure, and careful environmental adjustments. Slowly, these lessons became habits, and the baby began responding in tiny but meaningful ways. Each response, no matter how small, felt like a victory, strengthening the parents' confidence. Through sleepless nights, frustration, and fear, the parents discovered the power of perseverance. The emotional struggle became the foundation of a deep bond, built not on effortless moments, but on patience, understanding, and unconditional love. They began to see their baby not as fragile or broken, but as extraordinary and resilient, a unique life that demanded careful attention and profound care. Yet in return, it offered lessons in empathy, awareness, and the limitless depth of parental love. By the end of this period, the parents knew one thing for certain: their journey would not be easy, but it was theirs to embrace. Every tear, every cry, every tiny smile was a step toward understanding their extraordinary child. And in facing these emotional struggles, they began to realize that love, patience, and devotion could overcome even the most daunting challenges. Their millionaire baby was not just a child. They were a teacher, guiding them into a world where every sensation mattered, and every moment of care was priceless. After weeks of careful observation and emotional struggle, the expert doctor finally devised a specialized care plan for the millionaire baby. It was not just a set of instructions. It was a carefully crafted strategy designed to help the baby experience the world safely and begin forming bonds with his parents. The plan focused on 3 key principles: gentle exposure, controlled touch, and a calm, predictable environment. Each principle was tailored to the baby's rare sensitivity, and the parents were trained to follow them with precision and patience. The first part of the plan was gentle exposure. The doctor explained that the baby needed time to adjust to human contact in very small increments. Even the slightest touch could overwhelm him, so the parents were instructed to begin with indirect contact, such as sitting near him, speaking softly, and letting him observe their presence without feeling pressured. Over time, The baby would gradually learn to tolerate more interaction. This slow approach required patience and constant attention, but it was necessary to build trust without causing distress. Controlled touch was the next step. The doctor demonstrated techniques to the parents, showing them exactly how to hold, stroke, and support the baby. Each movement had to be deliberate, calm, and predictable. Random or sudden motions could trigger intense cries, but careful, consistent gestures would eventually provide comfort. Parents practiced these techniques tirelessly, learning to read every tiny signal from their child. Slight flinches, changes in breathing, or small facial expressions, all of which indicated whether the touch was safe or overwhelming. The environment was equally important. The doctor instructed them to keep the room quiet, with soft lighting, minimal noise, and gentle textures. Even subtle changes, such as the rustle of a blanket or a sudden shadow, could startle the baby. By controlling these factors, the baby could feel secure, reducing unnecessary stress. The family worked together to create a safe, nurturing space, turning their home into a haven that respected the baby's unique needs. One of the most critical parts of the plan was timing. The parents were taught to schedule interactions around the baby's natural rhythms, observing when he was calmest and avoiding overstimulation during moments of fatigue or hunger. This careful balance helped prevent frustration for both the baby and the parents. Teaching them to recognize his subtle cues became a daily practice, and with each successful interaction, their confidence and connection grew. Over the following days, small miracles began to appear. The baby started responding to his parents' presence with less tension, allowing gentle touches for brief moments without crying. Each tiny breakthrough was celebrated as a victory, a soft coo here, a relaxed hand there. These moments, though brief, became the foundation of trust and emotional bonding, showing the family that progress, even if gradual, was possible. The doctor continued to monitor the baby's reactions closely, adjusting the plan as needed and introducing new techniques to encourage comfort and interaction. He emphasized that patience was key and that each day would bring different challenges. Yet, with persistence, the family began to see the results. The baby's sensitivity remained extraordinary, but he was learning to cope, and the parents were learning to support him effectively. Through this innovative care plan, the family realized that love alone was not enough. It needed to be paired with understanding, strategy, and compassion. They learned to celebrate every small success, no matter how insignificant it seemed. Each calm moment was proof that their efforts were working, and that the baby, despite his extreme sensitivity, could thrive in the right environment. The journey was still long, and challenges remained. But for the first time, hope felt tangible, real, and achievable. By the end of this stage, the millionaire baby was beginning to show glimpses of comfort and trust. Tiny smiles, brief moments of calm, and even occasional curiosity were signs that the careful plan was taking effect. The parents felt a renewed sense of purpose, knowing that their dedication and the doctor's guidance were helping their extraordinary child navigate a world that often felt overwhelming. The innovative care plan had not only provided a roadmap for survival, it had opened the door to a future filled with connection, love, and possibility. As weeks turned into months, the millionaire baby began to show signs that amazed everyone around him. The careful care plan was starting to work, and tiny breakthroughs appeared like sparks of hope in a long, challenging journey. Each day brought new surprises, and every small change felt like a miracle to his exhausted but devoted parents. For the first time, they could see glimpses of the child they had dreamed of holding, connecting with, and loving. The earliest signs were subtle, almost easy to miss. A soft blink when his mother spoke, a gentle twitch of his fingers when his father moved closer. The parents learned to cherish these small gestures, realizing that for a baby with such extraordinary sensitivity, even the tiniest response was meaningful. Each sound he made now had intention, each movement carried significance, and every calm moment was a victory. The parents felt a sense of awe, as if they were witnessing a miracle unfold before their eyes. One day, as the mother gently reached toward him with the careful touch taught by the doctor, the baby did not cry immediately. Instead, he stared at her hand, his tiny eyes following her movements. Then, after a moment of hesitation, he allowed her to hold him softly against her chest. It was brief, but it was enough. enough to make the mother's heart swell with emotion, enough to prove that patience, love, and persistence could overcome even the most daunting challenges. The father, too, had his own breakthrough when he tried a new method of rocking the baby using a soft, rhythmic motion. The baby's body relaxed slightly, the tiny fists unclenched, and a quiet coo escaped his lips. It was a sound the parents had longed to hear, a sound that meant connection, a sound that made the long nights of worry worth every tear. They celebrated these moments privately, knowing that each one was a step closer to understanding their child and building trust that had seemed impossible at the beginning. The hospital staff watched in amazement as these small miracles continued. They noted that the baby's sensitivity had not disappeared, but he was learning to tolerate the world more. Each success was built on repetition, care, and careful observation. The doctors explained that these tiny steps were far more meaningful than a sudden leap in progress. The baby was learning at his own pace, and the parents were learning alongside him, discovering not only the depth of his needs, but the limitless strength of their own love and patience. One of the most touching breakthroughs came when the baby responded to a song. The mother softly hummed a lullaby she had sung countless times, and for the first time, the baby's crying paused, his tiny body relaxed, and he even moved his little fingers rhythmically. It was a brief moment, but for the family, it felt like magic. A connection had been made, a silent communication established, and the parents realized that their baby could indeed express joy and respond to love, even in his extraordinary sensitivity. These breakthroughs brought hope that stretched beyond the walls of the hospital. The family began to imagine a future where their child could interact, play, and thrive, not just survive. Each new gesture of comfort, each moment of calm, reinforced their determination, teaching them that extraordinary challenges required extraordinary dedication, patience, and creativity. The parents learned to celebrate every small victory, no matter how fleeting, because for their unique child, every tiny success mattered immensely. By the end of this period, the millionaire baby had transformed from a constantly crying, overwhelmed infant into a child who was slowly learning to navigate the world. Each breakthrough, though small, was proof that the right care, love, and attention could make a difference. The parents felt a profound sense of pride, hope, and gratitude, knowing that their perseverance was helping their extraordinary child thrive. Even though challenges remained, these small miracles proved that progress was possible, and that their journey, though unusual, was filled with joy, connection, and endless potential. As the baby grew stronger, calmer, and more responsive, the atmosphere around him began to shift. What was once a house filled with worry, endless crying, and sleepless nights slowly transformed into a home of hope, patience, and tiny victories. The parents, once overwhelmed and unsure, now held a quiet confidence in their hearts. They had learned to understand their extraordinary child, to anticipate his needs, and to celebrate every small success. Each day brought a new milestone, and each milestone brought a renewed sense of joy. The baby, who had once cried nonstop at every touch, now responded to gentle gestures with curiosity and recognition. His tiny eyes followed his parents' movements, and soft coos replaced sharp cries. Every small sound he made felt like a message, a way of connecting with the world around him. The parents realized that their child was teaching them patience, empathy, and the true meaning of unconditional love. He was no longer just a fragile, sensitive newborn. He was a resilient, extraordinary child, capable of growth and connection despite the challenges. The expert doctor continued to guide the family, providing advice, encouragement, and reassurance. He emphasized that the baby's sensitivity would remain a part of him, but with understanding and care, he could lead a fulfilling life. The parents embraced this reality, learning to balance caution with freedom, protection with exploration. They adjusted their expectations, but never their love. Their millionaire baby was thriving in a world he once found overwhelming, and the family could finally feel the relief and joy they had longed for. One particularly memorable moment came when the baby reached out his tiny hand to his mother without crying. It was a deliberate, confident gesture, and for the parents, it symbolized everything they had been working toward. Years of fear, worry, and sleepless nights seemed to culminate in this single act of trust. The father's eyes filled with tears as he watched, realizing that their extraordinary child could express affection and recognition in his own unique way. These moments became the foundation for the family's bond, a bond stronger than any challenge they had faced. The story of the millionaire baby soon spread beyond the walls of their home, capturing the attention of doctors, caregivers, and families around the world. People were amazed not only by the rarity of his condition, but by the unwavering dedication and love of his parents. His journey became an inspiration, showing that even the most extraordinary challenges could be met with patience, understanding, and resilience. The baby story reminded everyone that every life, no matter how unusual or fragile, had the potential to shine when met with care and compassion. Over time, the family developed their own rituals and routines that helped the baby feel safe and loved. Gentle music, soft lighting, slow movements, and consistent touch became part of his daily life. The parents had learned to communicate with him without words, through gestures, tone, and presence. The baby thrived under this attentive care, showing that extraordinary challenges could be turned into extraordinary growth. Each day became an opportunity to celebrate progress, and each moment of calm brought hope for an even brighter future. By the time the baby reached his first year, he had transformed into a little child capable of curiosity, playfulness, and connection. His sensitivity remained, but it no longer defined him in a limiting way. Instead, it became part of his unique identity, teaching his parents, doctors, and everyone who knew him about patience, love, and the beauty of resilience. The family felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude, knowing that their journey, though difficult, had created a deep bond and a life filled with meaning. In the end, the millionaire baby's story was not just about his condition, his wealth, or the shock of his cries. It was a story about hope, perseverance, and the power of love to transform even the most challenging circumstances. The parents had learned that extraordinary children require extraordinary care, and in giving that care, they discovered the extraordinary strength within themselves. Their journey became a beacon of inspiration, showing that with understanding, patience, and unwavering dedication, even the rarest challenges can lead to triumph, joy, and an unbreakable family bond.